The night I met Damian Moretti, he looked like a man who had already lost everything. Rain hammered against my windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up, turning the streets of Manhattan into streaks of gold and silver beneath the traffic lights. My old Honda Civic rattled every time I hit a pothole, the heater blowing lukewarm air that smelled faintly like burnt coffee from the cup I'd spilled 3 days earlier. It was 1:47 in the morning, and I was exhausted enough that my eyes burned every time I blinked. Double shifts at Holloway Books Cafe were slowly killing me, but overdue rent notices didn't care about exhaustion. Neither did student loans. I tightened both hands around the steering wheel as thunder rolled above the city. Most people were already home by now, asleep in warm apartments beside people they loved. Meanwhile, I was driving through downtown Manhattan in sneakers with holes in the soles, wondering if I had enough money left for groceries after paying Con Edison tomorrow. The light ahead turned red near Lexington Avenue, and I slowed beside a black SUV parked crooked against the curb. At first, I barely noticed it. Expensive cars weren't unusual in this part of the city. But then I saw the driver's side door hanging open, and someone sitting on the wet pavement beside it. My stomach tightened immediately. Every survival instinct told me to keep driving. Women alone at night didn't stop for strange men in dark streets. Especially not in Manhattan. Especially not during storms like this. But something about the way he sat there made me hesitate. His head rested against the SUV door, rain soaking through his black dress shirt. One sleeve was rolled halfway up his forearm, revealing an expensive silver watch and veins sharp beneath pale skin. Even from inside my car, I could tell he was handsome in a dangerous kind of way. Dark hair plastered wet against his forehead. Sharp jawline. Broad shoulders. The kind of face that looked cold, even unconscious. I should have driven away. Instead, I pulled over. "Claire, you are so stupid," I muttered under my breath as I grabbed my umbrella. The rain hit me instantly, freezing against my skin as I hurried toward him. Up close, he looked worse. His eyes were closed, breathing uneven, one hand loosely gripping what looked like an empty whiskey bottle. But it wasn't the alcohol that made my pulse jump. It was the gun resting near his shoe. I froze. My breath caught so fast it hurt. Every bad decision I'd ever made suddenly flashed through my head at once. Then his eyes opened. God, they were the coldest green eyes I had ever seen. Even drunk, they locked onto me with terrifying focus. Like some part of him never stopped calculating danger. "You're bleeding," I whispered before I could stop myself. A thin line of blood ran near his temple, already diluted pink by rainwater. He stared at me for a long moment without speaking. Then his gaze drifted toward the city street behind me like he expected someone to appear out of the storm. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. His voice was rough, controlled, dangerous in a way that made my heartbeat stumble. "Probably not," I admitted. Another crack of thunder echoed overhead. He tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Instinct took over before common sense could stop me. I caught his arm, and the second my fingers touched him, every muscle in his body tensed hard beneath my grip. Not fear. Reflex. Like violence lived too close to the surface. He looked down at my hand on his sleeve, then slowly back at my face. "You always help drunk strangers in the middle of the night?" he asked. "Only the ones bleeding beside luxury SUVs." For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered in his expression. Small. Gone instantly. But real. Rain poured harder around us, soaking my sweatshirt completely. He looked half dead, still terrifying. And somehow, against every ounce of logic I possessed, I heard myself say the words that changed my life forever. "Do you want me to drive you home?" For a second, I thought he was going to say no. Damian Moretti stared at me through the rain with those cold green eyes, unreadable, even half drunk, and soaked to the bone. Then his gaze shifted toward the empty street again, scanning shadows like he expected danger to step out of them at any moment. "You should leave," he said. Quietly. "You already said that. And you should have listened." I folded my arms tighter against the cold. "Look, either you get in the car, or I call an ambulance." Something dark flickered across his face at the word ambulance. Not fear exactly. More like irritation. He pushed himself upright using the SUV door and immediately swayed hard enough that I grabbed his arm again before he hit the pavement. Up close, he smelled like rain, whiskey, and expensive cologne underneath it all. His body felt solid beneath the wet black shirt, tense even while exhausted. "Easy," I muttered. His jaw tightened. I do not need help standing. That is interesting because you are currently losing an argument with gravity. Another brief flicker of amusement crossed his face. Tiny. Gone fast. But somehow it changed him. Made him look less like a threat and more like a man carrying too much weight alone. He reached into his jacket slowly and pulled out a black leather wallet. Inside was a driver's license with the name Damian Moretti printed beneath a photograph that somehow looked even colder than the real man standing beside me. Manhattan address. Upper East Side. Of course. Men who wore watches worth more than my yearly rent usually lived in places with private elevators and rooftop pools. You memorizing my information, Claire Bennett? My stomach dropped. How do you know my name? His eyes drifted toward the plastic cafe tag clipped to my hoodie. Heat rushed to my face instantly. Right. Okay. That was embarrassing. A little. Rainwater slid down the sharp line of his jaw as he looked at me. Still planning to drive me home? I should have walked away right then. Every instinct kept screaming that this man was dangerous in ways I could not understand yet. But there was exhaustion in his eyes too. Something lonely beneath all that control. And maybe I recognized it because I carried the same thing around myself. Get in the car, I sighed. The drive downtown felt strangely intimate for two people who barely knew each other. Rain tapped steadily against the windshield, while soft jazz played low from my ancient speakers because the radio knob had been broken for months. Damien sat in the passenger seat with his head leaned back against the window, eyes closed but never fully relaxed. Even drunk, he stayed alert. Like sleep was something he no longer trusted. This car sounds like it might explode, he murmured after several blocks. Thank you. She is very sensitive about her age. A low sound escaped him then. Not quite a laugh, but close. I glanced sideways at him at the next red light. In better condition, he would have been intimidating enough to stop traffic on looks alone. Dark hair, sharp cheekbones, expensive black shirt rolled at the sleeves. The kind of man women noticed instantly when he entered a room. But right now he looked tired. Human. The cut near his temple had started bleeding again slightly. You should probably get stitches, I said softly. I have had worse. That is not comforting. Silence settled between us again. Comfortable somehow. Strange considering I was driving a wealthy stranger through Manhattan at 2 a.m. while he carried a gun I was trying very hard not to think about. Then suddenly his hand shot out and grabbed the dashboard as the car behind us accelerated too fast through the intersection. The movement was instant. Reflexive. Dangerous. His breathing changed slightly as he stared into the side mirror. Do not stop the car, he said quietly. Every nerve in my body tightened. Damien, just keep driving. The black sedan behind us stayed 3 cars back for the next 4 blocks. And for the first time that night, I realized the storm outside was not the most dangerous thing surrounding us. My pulse would not slow down after that. I kept both hands tight on the steering wheel while rain blurred the city around us into streaks of silver light and dark shadows. The black sedan stayed behind us through every turn, never getting too close, never falling too far back. Damien watched it through the passenger window with an expression so calm it somehow made me more nervous. Who are they? I asked quietly. He did not answer right away. His thumb brushed once against the cut near his temple before he looked at me again. People I would rather avoid tonight. That is not a comforting answer either. You ask many questions for someone who picked up an armed stranger at 2 a.m. I am beginning to regret that decision, actually. Another faint almost smile touched his mouth. Tiny. Controlled. Like he had forgotten how to do it naturally a long time ago. We crossed into the Upper East Side 10 minutes later. The streets changed slowly around us. Cleaner buildings. Expensive storefronts. Quiet sidewalks lined with polished black cars and glowing penthouse windows high above the city. My Honda felt painfully out of place here. So did I. Damien gave directions in short, precise sentences until we turned onto a private road overlooking the river. Massive iron gates appeared ahead through the rain. Before I could even process where we were, headlights flashed across us from both sides. Black SUVs rolled out silently from hidden driveways, surrounding my little Honda, so fast my breath caught in my throat. Oh my God. Men in dark suits stepped into the rain. Tall. Serious. Earpieces glowing beneath the streetlights. One moved toward my driver's side window while another opened Damien's door immediately. Boss. The single word changed everything. Every man there straightened the second Damien stepped out of my car. Relief crossed their faces so quickly, it almost looked like panic underneath. One of them glanced at the blood near Damien's temple and went pale. "We have been looking for you for 3 hours." Damien ignored him completely. Instead, he leaned down slightly and looked back into my car. Rainwater dripped from his dark hair onto the pavement between us. "Thank you for the ride, Claire." I stared at him, at the men surrounding him, at the giant estate gates slowly opening behind them. The property beyond looked less like a house and more like something from a movie. Stone walls, massive windows glowing warm gold against the storm. Security cameras turning quietly toward every angle. "Who are you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. Silence spread instantly between the men around us. One of them actually reached toward his jacket before Damien lifted a single hand slightly. Everyone froze. The power in that tiny movement sent cold chills down my arms. Damien's green eyes stayed locked on mine. Calm. Unreadable. "Someone you should forget," he said softly. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed something carefully onto my passenger seat. A black umbrella I had forgotten beside him earlier. My fingers brushed his accidentally when I picked it up. "Warm despite the rain. Steady despite everything. Drive home safely," he said. "And Claire." "What?" His gaze held mine for one long second too long. "Do not stop for strangers again." Then he turned and walked away into the lights of the estate, while men in black suits surrounded him instantly like moving shadows. The gates closed slowly behind them with heavy metallic finality. And suddenly I was alone again inside my rattling Honda Civic, soaked hoodie clinging to my skin, staring at the place where Damien Moretti had disappeared. I should have driven away immediately. I should have forgotten him exactly like he told me to. Instead, I sat there another full minute watching rain slide down the windshield while one terrifying realization settled quietly into my chest. Men like Damien Moretti did not survive the kind of fear I had just witnessed around him unless the entire city was afraid of them too. I barely slept after that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw green eyes in the rain and black SUVs surrounding my tiny Honda like something out of a crime movie. By 7:30 the next morning, I was back at Holloway Books Cafe running on 2 hours of sleep and too much caffeine. The smell of espresso and cinnamon usually calmed me down. Not today. My hand still shook every time the front door opened. "Claire, table 6 needs their check," my manager called from behind the counter. "And try smiling like you do not hate everyone." "That costs extra," I muttered, grabbing the receipt book. Morning crowds blurred together in waves of Manhattan professionals ordering overpriced lattes before work. Lawyers in tailored coats. College students with headphones. Tourists trying to pronounce macchiato correctly. Normal people. Safe people. I kept telling myself last night had been a bizarre one-time mistake. I helped a drunk rich guy. End of story. Then the black SUV parked across the street. My stomach dropped so fast it hurt. Matte black. Tinted windows. Too expensive for this neighborhood. It stayed there through 3 customer rushes and half my shift. Never moving. Never leaving. "Claire." I blinked hard. "Sorry." "What?" My coworker Jenna leaned closer beside the espresso machine. "You have been staring out that window for like 10 minutes. Are you okay?" "Yeah, just tired." But my pulse refused to slow down. Around noon, the cafe door opened again, and every instinct in my body immediately locked onto the man walking inside. Tall, dark gray suit tailored perfectly across broad shoulders. Silver watch glinting beneath the lights. One of the men from last night. He moved calmly through the cafe while conversations around him softened instinctively. People noticed power even when they did not understand it. He stopped directly at the counter. "Claire Bennett." "That depends who is asking." His expression did not change. "My employer wishes to thank you for your assistance last evening." "Oh no, absolutely not. Tell your employer I am fine without whatever creepy Mafia thank you gift this is." Jenna nearly dropped a tray behind me. The man actually looked mildly offended. "Mr. Moretti is not Mafia." That was not convincing at all. He ignored that completely and slid a small black box across the counter toward me. Expensive velvet. The kind jewelry stores use when things inside cost more than rent. I cannot accept this. It is not optional. My eyes narrowed instantly. See? That sounded very Mafia. A few customers glanced toward us nervously now. The man sighed almost imperceptibly like he had dealt with difficult situations before, but apparently never coffee shop waitresses with no self-preservation. Mr. Moretti asked me to deliver his gratitude personally. Why? For the first time, the man hesitated slightly. Because he remembers very little about last night. But he remembers you. Something warm and uneasy twisted low in my chest before I could stop it. I hated that reaction immediately. The man stepped back slightly. Good afternoon, Miss Bennett. Then he walked out of the cafe without another word. The black SUV disappeared seconds later into Manhattan traffic. Jenna appeared beside me instantly. Claire. No, Claire. Absolutely not. She pointed at the velvet box still sitting between us. Open it. I should not have. Every smart instinct I had screamed to throw it away unopened. Instead, I lifted the lid slowly. Inside rested a delicate silver bracelet beside a folded handwritten note. My fingers hesitated before unfolding it carefully. The handwriting was sharp, precise, controlled. Thank you for getting me home alive. The bracelet means nothing compared to the debt I owe you. Damien. I stared at those words for a long moment while the sounds of the cafe faded around me completely. Then Jenna whispered the one thing I had been trying desperately not to think since last night. Claire, who exactly did you save? I tried to give the bracelet back the next day. That should tell you everything about my survival instincts. The silver bracelet sat untouched inside my locker during my entire shift, while I repeated the same argument in my head over and over. Normal people did not send armed men with velvet jewelry boxes. Normal people did not own estates guarded like military compounds. And normal people definitely did not make my heart race every time I remembered the sound of their voice in the rain. By Thursday night, I was annoyed enough at myself to do something about it. Holloway Books Cafe closed at 10. By 10:15, I stood outside on the sidewalk wearing my faded blue hoodie and holding the bracelet box like it might explode. The city smelled like rain again, even though the storm had already passed. Taxis rushed through wet streets, while music drifted from rooftop bars above us. Manhattan glittered at night in a way that almost made loneliness look beautiful. Jenna locked the cafe door beside me and immediately spotted the box in my hand. You are not actually going to return jewelry to the scary billionaire, are you? I am setting boundaries. With the man whose security team probably has sniper training? You are not helping. She stared at me for a long moment. Claire, I Googled him. My stomach tightened instantly. And there is almost nothing online about Damien Moretti. That somehow felt worse. Jenna crossed her arms. Rich men usually love attention. This guy practically erased himself from the internet. I looked away toward the street. Maybe he just values privacy. Or maybe he buries people in forests. Jenna, I am just saying. Before I could answer, headlights rolled slowly across the curb beside us. Black SUV. Of course. The same man from the cafe stepped out wearing another immaculate suit despite the late hour. Miss Bennett. Jenna immediately took 3 giant steps backward. Traitor. Your employer really needs a hobby, I muttered. The bodyguard ignored that perfectly. Mr. Moretti asked if you would join him for dinner. I blinked. Absolutely not. He anticipated that response. The man handed me a folded note instead. I should have refused it. Instead, I unfolded the paper carefully beneath the streetlight. I owe you a proper thank you. One dinner. No pressure. No obligations. Damien. Heat rose annoyingly into my face again. I hated that his handwriting alone somehow sounded calm in my head. Tell him no. You can tell him yourself. My pulse stumbled. What? The SUV door behind him opened slowly. Damien stepped out into the glow of the streetlights wearing a black wool coat over a dark charcoal suit. The cut near his temple had healed into a faint shadow now, but somehow he looked even more dangerous completely sober. Calm. Controlled. Expensive. Every person walking down the sidewalk seemed to instinctively move around him without understanding why. His green eyes found mine immediately. Claire. My throat suddenly felt dry. Damien. Jenna made a small, strangled noise beside me before whispering directly into my ear. Oh my God, he is horrifyingly attractive. Then she abandoned me completely and hurried toward the subway entrance. Coward. Damien glanced briefly at the bracelet box still in my hands. You were going to return it. It is too much. It is silver. Exactly. One corner of his mouth lifted slightly. You are difficult to impress. You sent armed men into my workplace. Technically, they were only armed. Outside. I stared at him in disbelief while he looked almost serious saying it. Rain began falling lightly again around us, soft against the pavement and glowing city lights. Damien stepped closer slowly, careful enough that I noticed. Like he understood I might run if he moved too fast. I meant what I wrote, he said quietly. You helped me when no one else would. You were drunk and bleeding. I am not a saint. No, his gaze held mine steadily. You are just kind. Something about the way he said it made my chest ache unexpectedly. Like kindness was rare in his world. Like maybe nobody had shown him any in a very long time. Then his eyes drifted briefly toward the dark street behind me, and every trace of softness disappeared instantly. His entire body sharpened with alertness. Get inside the cafe, he said quietly. My heartbeat skipped. Why? Damien kept staring toward the opposite sidewalk where a black sedan had just parked beneath the broken glow of a street lamp. The exact same sedan from the night I drove him home. Everything changed in Damien's face the second he saw that car. The softness disappeared completely. One moment he had been standing beside me in the rain, looking almost human beneath the city lights. The next, he became something colder, sharper, dangerous in a way that made the air around us feel heavier. Inside, he repeated quietly. Now. My pulse jumped hard enough to hurt. Damien, what is going on? His bodyguard had already turned toward the street. One hand pressed subtly near his jacket while his eyes tracked the sedan across the intersection. The car remained parked beneath the flickering street lamp with tinted windows too dark to see through. Waiting. Watching. I hated how familiar it felt. You know them, I whispered. Damien did not answer immediately. Rain tapped softly against his coat, while passing headlights streaked silver across his face. Then finally, very calmly, he said, They know me. Fear curled low in my stomach. Real fear this time. Not curiosity. Not fascination. The kind that makes your instincts start screaming before your brain catches up. Claire. His voice softened slightly when he looked back at me. Please go inside. Please. That surprised me more than anything else. Men like Damien Moretti did not seem like the kind who said please often. Before I could respond, the black sedan's headlights suddenly turned on, bright against the rain. My breath caught instantly. Damien moved closer without hesitation, placing himself slightly between me and the street in one smooth motion. Protective. Automatic. The sedan remained motionless another few seconds before slowly pulling away from the curb and disappearing into Manhattan traffic. Nobody moved until the taillights vanished completely. Only then did Damien finally exhale. Barely noticeable, but enough for me to realize how tense he had been. Who are they? I asked again quietly. This time, he looked tired instead of dangerous. A mistake I should have handled days ago. That does not answer anything. I know. Rain slid down the sharp edge of his jaw as he studied me silently for a moment. You should stay away from me, Claire. My laugh came out nervous. You keep saying that while simultaneously sending jewelry to my job. One side of his mouth twitched slightly. I am aware I send mixed signals. That is one way to describe it. The bodyguard stepped closer carefully. Boss, we should leave. Damien ignored him completely. His attention stayed fixed on me with unsettling intensity. Did anyone follow you home after work this week? What? Answer the question. I frowned. No, I do not think so. Think carefully. Something in his voice made my chest tighten. No, I repeated more quietly. Damien nodded once, though tension still lingered around his eyes. Good. Damien. He looked at me again. You are starting to scare me. For the first time since I met him, genuine regret crossed his expression. Small but unmistakable. That was never my intention. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. So did the exhaustion underneath it. He looked like a man carrying too many secrets and too little sleep. Before I could stop myself, I asked softly, What happened to you that night? Silence stretched between us while rain fell steadily around the glowing city streets. Damien's eyes drifted briefly toward the dark skyline behind me before returning to my face. Someone I trusted decided I was easier to replace than obey. The calm way he said it somehow made the words worse. That black sedan belonged to people connected to him. A chill slid down my spine. You mean the man who hurt you? Damien's gaze sharpened instantly. Nobody hurts me, Claire. There was no arrogance in the statement. Just fact. Cold and absolute. Yet somehow, standing this close to him beneath the rain, I realized something else too. The dangerous part was not his power. It was how controlled he remained despite it. Then his eyes lowered briefly toward the bracelet box still clutched against my chest. Keep it, he said quietly. Why? His expression softened just enough to make my heartbeat stumble again. "Because if they ever come near you," he said, "I want them to know you belong under my protection." I should have walked away after that conversation. Any sane person would have. Instead, Damien Moretti stayed in my head for the next 4 days like a song I could not stop hearing. The bracelet remained hidden beneath my hoodie sleeve during every shift at the cafe. I told myself I only wore it because taking it off somehow felt rude. That was a lie. The truth was worse. Every time I looked at the thin silver chain against my wrist, I remembered the way Damien had stood between me and danger without hesitation. Nobody had ever done that before. Friday night arrived cold and windy. Manhattan looked washed silver beneath low clouds as I locked up the cafe alone just after 11. Jenna had called in sick, which meant I had spent 10 straight hours serving tourists and cleaning espresso machines while trying not to think about green eyes and dangerous promises. My feet hurt. My back hurt. And I wanted nothing more than a shower and sleep. I pulled my hood tighter against the wind and started toward the subway entrance 3 blocks away. The streets were quieter than usual. Too quiet. The farther I walked from the crowded avenue, the more uneasy I felt. Every sound seemed sharper somehow. Car tires against wet pavement. Distant sirens. Footsteps behind me. I slowed slightly. The footsteps slowed too. My pulse jumped instantly. "Do not panic, Claire." Maybe it was nothing. Maybe Manhattan had simply destroyed my ability to feel normal after midnight. I kept walking. Faster now. The footsteps behind me matched pace immediately. Cold fear spread through my chest. I glanced quickly over my shoulder and spotted 2 men about half a block back wearing dark jackets and baseball caps pulled low. One lifted his phone slightly the second he noticed me looking. Every instinct screamed at once. I grabbed my phone from my pocket with shaking fingers and nearly dropped it trying to unlock the screen. Who was I even supposed to call? The police? Damien? The thought terrified me because part of me already knew who would answer faster. I turned the corner toward the subway stairs and almost collided directly into another man standing beside the entrance. He stepped sideways instantly, blocking my path with calm, deliberate ease. "Miss Bennett." My blood turned to ice. "Excuse me. We just need a moment of your time." The 2 men behind me were closer now. Too close. Panic hit hard enough to blur my vision for a second. "I do not know you, but you know Damien Moretti." The way he said Damien's name made fear crawl down my spine. "I think you have the wrong person." "No," he said softly. "We really do not." I stepped backward immediately, heart hammering violently against my ribs. The silver bracelet suddenly felt heavy around my wrist. One of the men glanced down at it and smiled faintly. Wrong answer. Terror crashed through me all at once. I turned sharply to run back toward the avenue just as headlights exploded across the street beside us. Black SUVs. 3 of them. Tires screeched against wet pavement while suited men moved out almost instantly. Fast. Controlled. The atmosphere changed so violently it felt like the city itself inhaled. The man blocking me swore under his breath and stepped back immediately. Then Damien appeared. He emerged from the middle SUV wearing a dark coat over black dress clothes, rain catching in his hair beneath the streetlights. Calm fury radiated from him so intensely that every person nearby froze instinctively. His green eyes locked onto me first, not the men surrounding us. Me. Claire. My knees nearly gave out from relief alone. Damien's gaze moved slowly toward the men near the subway entrance, and something cold entered his expression. "You approached someone under my protection," he said quietly. Nobody answered him. Nobody even moved. Then Damien looked back at me again, softer this time despite the storm brewing underneath his control. "Did they touch you?" I shook my head immediately. And no. His jaw flexed once before he walked toward me through the rain. The men near the subway backed away without being told. Fear. Real fear. I realized then that Damien Moretti was not simply a powerful man. He was the kind of man other dangerous people prayed never to disappoint. The ride to Damien's penthouse happened so fast my brain barely kept up with it. One moment I had been cornered outside a subway station, trying not to panic. The next, I sat inside the back seat of a black SUV wrapped in silence, so tense it felt physical. Rain streaked against the windows while Manhattan blurred past in silver and gold reflections. Damien sat beside me wearing that same terrifying calm expression he always carried when angry. His bodyguard drove. Another SUV followed behind us close enough that I could see headlights filling the rear window every few seconds. Nobody spoke for almost 10 minutes. Then finally, quietly, Damien asked, "Are you hurt?" No, my voice sounded smaller than I wanted. Just scared. Something shifted in his eyes at that word. Not weakness. Something darker. Controlled anger pressed so tightly beneath his expression that it almost frightened me more than yelling would have. "They should never have approached you." "Who are they?" He stared out the window briefly before answering. "A former business associate who believes I am becoming distracted." My stomach tightened instantly. "By me." Damien turned slowly toward me. "Claire." The way he said my name made my pulse stumble again. Calm. Deep. Careful. Men like him look for weaknesses. "And you think I am one?" No, his gaze locked onto mine steadily. "I think you are the first good thing that has happened to me in a very long time." The honesty in his voice hit harder than I expected. I looked away first. Outside, the city lights reflected across the East River like broken glass. Everything suddenly felt unreal. A week ago, my biggest concern had been rent payments and espresso machine repairs. Now I was sitting beside a man powerful enough to terrify other dangerous men just by arriving somewhere. The SUV finally slowed beneath a private underground entrance guarded by steel gates and security cameras. Damien stepped out first before holding the door open for me himself. No driver. No bodyguard. Him. Rain mist drifted through the garage while elevator doors slid open nearby. I followed him silently into the private elevator, hyper-aware of how close he stood beside me in the enclosed space. He smelled faintly like cedar and rain. Expensive. Clean. Dangerous. The elevator opened directly into his penthouse, and for a second I forgot how to breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Manhattan like something from a movie. The city glittered endlessly below us while soft jazz played somewhere in the background. Dark marble floors. Low golden lighting. Shelves filled with books and crystal decanters. Beautiful in a lonely kind of way. "You live here alone?" I asked quietly. Damien loosened his coat slowly. "Usually." Something about that answer made warmth creep unexpectedly into my chest. I should not have noticed that. He crossed toward the kitchen without another word and returned moments later holding a glass of water. "Drink." That sounded less like an offer and more like an order. "You are shaking." I looked down and realized he was right. My hand still trembled slightly from the subway encounter. Damien noticed too. Of course he did. He noticed everything. His expression softened almost imperceptibly as he stepped closer. "Claire." My heartbeat immediately betrayed me. "What?" "Look at me." I did. Big mistake. Those green eyes were gentler tonight than I had ever seen them. Tired too, like he had not truly rested in years. "I am sorry," he said quietly, "for dragging you into this." The sincerity in his voice caught me completely off guard. "You did not drag me anywhere." I whispered. "I chose to stop that night." His jaw tightened slightly. "That decision almost put you in danger." But it did not. Silence settled softly between us while rain tapped against the giant windows overlooking Manhattan. Damien stood close enough now that I could see the faint scar near his temple beneath the warm light. Without thinking, my hand lifted slightly toward it before I stopped myself. His eyes dropped briefly to my fingers, then back to my face. The air between us changed instantly. Not unsafe. Worse. Intimate. Damien's voice lowered carefully. "Claire." Just my name. But the way he said it made every nerve in my body wake up at once. Then his phone rang sharply across the room, shattering the moment completely. Damien closed his eyes once like he hated the interruption before answering the call. I watched his expression harden slowly with every passing second. By the time he hung up, the softness was gone again. "I need to leave for an hour," he said quietly. "You are staying here tonight." I blinked. "Damien, I cannot just stay in a Mafia penthouse." "Yes," he said calmly. "You can." I did not sleep much that night. Damien's penthouse was quieter than any place I had ever been in my life. No sirens outside the windows. No neighbors screaming through paper-thin apartment walls. No rattling pipes or broken radiators. Just soft rain against glass and the distant hum of Manhattan beneath us. It should have felt peaceful. Instead, I lay awake on a guest bed bigger than my entire apartment, wondering how my life had become connected to a man like Damien Moretti in less than 2 weeks. Around 3 in the morning, I gave up trying to sleep and wandered barefoot into the kitchen searching for water. The penthouse glowed softly beneath low lights, all dark marble and quiet luxury. Beautiful but cold, like nobody truly lived there. Then I noticed someone standing near the windows overlooking the city. Damien. My heartbeat jumped instantly. He had returned without me hearing him. He stood with one hand in his pocket, suit jacket gone, dark dress shirt rolled at the sleeves, while rain painted silver reflections across the glass behind him. He looked exhausted, more exhausted than I had ever seen him. "You are awake," he said quietly without turning around. "So are you." A tired smile touched his mouth briefly. "Fair point." I stepped closer carefully. "Everything okay?" Silence stretched for a second too long. Then Damien finally looked at me. Something in his expression made my chest tighten immediately. Relief. Actual relief. Like seeing me standing there safe had eased something inside him. "Yes," he said softly. "Now it is." Nobody had ever looked at me like that before. Like my existence alone changed the atmosphere in a room. I wrapped my fingers tighter around the glass in my hands just to steady myself. "You should get some sleep." Damien walked slowly toward the kitchen island instead, loosening the top button of his shirt like the night had weighed heavily on him. I forgot what sleep feels like years ago. That is dramatic. It is honest. The city lights reflected in his green eyes as he leaned lightly against the counter across from me. Up close, he looked different tonight. Not softer exactly, but less untouchable. More human beneath all the control. "Claire," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" "Depends." "Why did you stop that night?" My breath caught slightly. "What?" "You saw a stranger beside a road in the middle of a storm. Most people would have kept driving." I looked down at the water in my glass. "I do not know." "That is not true." He always noticed when I lied. It was irritating. "Maybe," I admitted softly, "because you looked lonely." Silence. Heavy and immediate. Damien stared at me like I had said something nobody else ever dared to. Then he laughed once very quietly. Not cold. Not mocking. Sad almost. "That," he said, "might be the most dangerous thing anyone has ever noticed about me." The honesty in his voice settled deep in my chest. Rain continued sliding against the giant windows around us, while Manhattan glittered below like another universe entirely. I realized then that Damien Moretti carried loneliness the same way other men carried weapons. Hidden, controlled, always within reach. "You are not what I expected," I whispered before thinking. His eyes held mine. Steadily. "Neither are you." The air shifted between us again. Warm, intimate, dangerous in a completely different way now. Damien stepped closer slowly, giving me every chance to move away. I did not. His voice lowered carefully. "Do you know what bothers me most about all of this?" "What?" "I spent years making sure nobody could get close enough to matter." My pulse started racing again. And then, his gaze dropped briefly toward the silver bracelet on my wrist before returning to my face. Then one exhausted bookstore waitress drove me home in the rain. I should have looked away. I could not. The city glowed around us while thunder rolled softly beyond the windows. Damien reached up slowly, brushing one strand of hair behind my ear with a gentleness that completely ruined me. "Why me?" I whispered before I could stop myself. His expression softened in a way I would remember for the rest of my life. "Because when everyone else wanted something from me," he said quietly, "you were the only person who tried to take me home."